Whether you are a walking, breathing advocate of all things Doctor Who, or whether you have no clue as to what classic Doctor Who is and you want some light shed on that, welcome to the show. Chosen Chimp here, and I have a mad old load of fun reviewing the classics, if you want to call these videos reviews. I just can't get enough of these bat-plop crazy Doctor Who serials from the last century, with all their eccentric charisma, interesting acting, courageous special effects and decidedly rabid narratives. Classic Doctor Who began in 1963 and ended in 1989, 26 years. 26 seasons of episodic storytelling set around an adventurous time traveller and his human companions. If you want to consider the Paul McGann movie from 1996 as classic as well, then go ahead. I can hands down state that I love classic Who as much as I love New Who, and objectively, of course New Who is superior, and I will place strong emphasis on the word objectively, because New Who is objectively superior to classic Who in the same way that the screen you are watching this video on is objectively superior to the screen that you'd have watched Noel's House Party on back in the early 90s. Production values have evolved over time and so has technology, so naturally the end result is where the money's at. But here's the most important thing to clarify before we go any further here. Take away the ob and replace it with sub, and therein lies the truth about Doctor Who and so many other shows like it. Your response to the entertainment is based on your own personal experience, and it exists in your head for keeps. It really doesn't matter that I and so many others think that Orphan 55 is a big dollop of fermented trouser jelly, because if you liked it, then you probably liked it for good reasons. That is your business and power to you, god damn it. You're not wrong. Take it from Mr. I Like Game of Thrones Season 8 over here. Whew, felt good to get that off my chest. In the 60s and 70s and 80s, Doctor Who did a marvellous job of scaring children witless, ruffling the feathers of joyless busybodies, and inspiring creative minds across the world. It wasn't perfect. The quality of Doctor Who programming fluctuated throughout the ages, and much like today's brand appears to be, it was a politically contentious game of two halves, and that, good patrons, is a topic for another video. My personal testimony of the classics comes from the memory of my giddy childhood eyes as they gazed into a big old TV screen that showed this, those, that, and that's horrible. Growing up with that stuff, and whatever path you took in life thereafter, having all those wacky creations implanted in your brain rendered the imagination firmly lit. And that is why, folks, I think fans are so passionate about this brand. The sheer wealth of ideas and concepts and characters is so huge, and branches into so many different places that it's the gift that keeps on giving. The worlds, the monsters, the events, the characters, the one-off and the recurring, the comedy, the drama, the adventure, the heartache, the horror. Classic Doctor Who had all of it, and then some. Watching classic Doctor Who is different to watching New Who in a number of different ways. The big wodge of new Doctor Who likes to pride itself on the standalone story for each of its episodes, with the biggest story arcs woven in subtle threads throughout, just so we can look forward to that all-important series climax, with the fully manageable two-parters along the way just to guide us through the journey. In contrast, back in the 60s, 70s and 80s, Doctor Who was a show that was all about the episodic storytelling, constantly and throughout with no pause. Serials could contain anything from 2 episodes to 14 episodes, but mostly rested between 4 or 6. And this is why I refer to the old stuff as serials or adventures, because referring to them as episodes can imply that I might only be talking about one part of that story. So if you were there and you watched Doctor Who on a weekly Saturday tea time basis, you were in the midst of a singular adventure which would take you through the entire month and beyond. There was also a bigger picture woven on top of individual serials, because most of the time the closing moments of one serial would then lead directly into the next. The William Hartnell adventures were especially slick at this, but this wandering adventurer's exploits from place to place, companion to companion, enemy to enemy, was covered with remarkable attention to detail throughout. It's probably a little bit misleading of me to say that the first episode of An Unearthly Child leads through one fluid stream directly towards the final episode of Survival, but all things considered and given that it was a 26-year-long TV show, it wasn't far off. For every year that passed, Doctor Who built upon its own mythology and painted an ever-rich tapestry based on its own legacy, and would remind viewers of that legacy at every available point. For this reason, it was very important for the debut series of New Who back in 2005 to clear the canvas a little, as though not to immediately drown itself in backstory. Here's an alien, here's his ship, his planet was destroyed, so he's a bit sad. Let's begin. You want nods to the old stuff? Well, you got 'em, but only in moderation. We're going forwards here. So I think I've hammered the point hard enough now that there is so much classic Doctor Who, so many sagas, colours, settings, companions, styles, doctors, and no two ages of Doctor Who were alike. This vanishing box and these noisy bin monsters were the only thing that remained consistent throughout that time, and even they changed colour. So if you're gonna jump back in time for the first time, then you're in for one hell of a ride. But if you're looking to take the A to B route, then you're gonna get stuck near enough right at the first hurdle, because many of the serials from the William Hartnell tenure and the Patrick Troughton tenure are missing, presumably never to be found, and that's the nature of TV in the 60s. And I think we're touching on something very important here. Consider this, young patrons of the beloved streaming service, who I would be a horrendous hypocrite for criticising because I gorge on streaming like I'm flipping 12 years old. If you like Doctor Who in the 60s and early 70s and you missed an episode, then that's it, done for, gone. You lost your window, mate. In certain circumstances there were repeats, but they were sparse and pertaining only to certain serials. In the mid-70s you may have been in the small bracket who owned a Betamax or a VHS recorder, which you could use to tape these stories off the telly, but more likely you didn't have that kind of tech until the 80s, which was when home videos began trickling through anyway. By that time you may have found more joy in collecting the novelizations because they were cheaper, easier to acquire, and were as consistent in their storytelling as the TV shows. Whatever way you decided to consume Doctor Who back in the day, it was hard work. Maybe you were like me, who went Doctor Who crazy not long after the show was axed. Those 26 years of entertainment potentially squashed together in one big old mass for you to catch up on. Even then, saving the pennies to buy those videos, or get your mate to tape them off UK Gold, or waiting for those random sporadic repeats on BBC, which you had no real intel on until they turned up in the TV guide, you'd still only get a fraction. Looking back, I guess they were kind of standalone. Every serial was a treasure trove unto its own, something you'd sit down and absorb time and time again until you knew every line and every scene. More often than not even really thinking about what the Doctor did next or what he did before, but living in the moment of that particular serial and getting fully enthralled in that little magic box of wonders and all the scope inside of it. So what about the time test? I might be speaking for myself here, but I don't consider the occasional cheap effect and bit of bad acting any real reason not to like the old stuff. Why wouldn't Doctor Who have all those things? Think about it. This man's acting is awful, but that's why it's funny. This Merker looks stupid, but also charming. How can you not love those flat backgrounds? You never seen a play? These effects are insane. A British TV channel made this. It's ambitious as hell. Bad continuity? It's sci-fi time travel, use your imagination. Hair and costumes? Everything has hair and costumes. Have I gone too far? Yes, I've gone too far. Am I basing my passion for the classics solely on nostalgia? Well, yeah, I mean that's what you do with stuff that's old. But if you're watching it now for the first time, you can still ground it in its respective time and place. I could go on. There is nothing like Doctor Who. Can you even believe that it's still going? However you might obtain the classics, you have at your disposal a preservation of historical science fiction that's so much fun, and so full of life and with an astounding level of variety. A mind-blowing sprawl of content. Consider the classics as a full-course buffet of adventure where you can chop and change, go to different places in different chapters, but wherever you end up you will always be entertained. I love how the classics were made, and I love how they are presented to the human population in today's world. The more time that passes, the more that stuff like this becomes obscure, and that's great. What are your fondest memories of classic Doctor Who? Sound off in the comments, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Have a good one.